Good evening, everyone. It's weekday. It's Wednesday. I'm Dwayne Whitmer, so you know it's time for the weekly Whitmer Wednesday. This one's going to be a good topic that tends to bore most people, so I'll keep it fun and enjoyable. We're going to talk about the IRS this week. We're going to talk about taxes. We're going to talk about tax law, and we're going to talk about the bullshit that is the IRS. As always, we are live at Dwayne J. Whitmer on Facebook. We are live at Whitmer for NY27 on Twitter. Again, the throwback to my failed congressional campaign in 2020. And, this will be put up on YouTube later. This one's going to be a pretty fun topic this week. Like I said, I'll try to keep it lighthearted. I'll try to keep it fun. We're going to talk about the IRS and the fact that they've openly admitted multiple times to essentially auditing the poor and low-income families at a higher rate than they audit the millionaires. And as an accountant, most of you may not know who I am. I own an accounting firm. I'm going to share some examples of them doing that, and it's true. Before we begin, I'm going to start my timer for 15 minutes. I like to keep these short so I don't waste your time. You guys got things to do. So yeah, before we dig into it, I do own an accounting firm. I went to college for accounting, worked in public accounting for a few years, and actually, speaking of defiance and the insurgency agenda and the state of defiance and resistance through non-electoral means, I actually started my firm because of Obamacare. There were guidelines in place where if you didn't have insurance, and this is where a lot of this did start, if you didn't have health insurance, you had to pay a penalty. And also, if you were a business that had more than 50 employees, you were mandated to provide health insurance for your employees at your own cost. So during this whole time, during Obamacare, Nancy Pelosi was quoted as saying, we need to pass this bill to see what's in it. And as I've said before, just because you won an election or you are in politics or you are a representative, it doesn't make you more qualified or more intelligent than anything else. And I actually believe that most politicians and elected officials are actually less intelligent than the average human being and have less common sense because they're not in the real world. They're in this, ivory tower of ignorance. Nancy Pelosi said we have to pass Obamacare to see what's in it. I spent like a week and I read the bill and I found some loopholes that allowed me to help some companies that had more than 50 employees not deal with the mandate. And then also what I noticed was when Obamacare's fines and penalties started to be implemented, they directly affected the poor at a higher rate. Low-income people who could not pay for insurance had to pay a penalty. So, hey, buddy, you and your wife are married. You don't make enough to be able to afford insurance. Now you have to pay a 2% or $695 penalty for not having insurance. So now it's another, $1,200 or $1,300 out of your pocket. So my first start of resistance actually started with they allowed an opt-out. They allowed you to say that you deemed coverage as unaffordable. Therefore, you did not have insurance because it was deemed unaffordable. So I worked with a lot of low-income families who didn't have insurance, and I just said, look, I'm willing to check this box that coverage was deemed unaffordable. The IRS has no right to tell you how to spend your money. The IRS has no right to tell you how to budget your money. The IRS has no right to tell you what you should prioritize in your life and spending. So we were checking this box, coverage deemed unaffordable. And what happened was the IRS started to do desk reviews and audits on these people and sending them letters saying, hey, you didn't have insurance. You said coverage was unaffordable. We disagree. Pay the fine. And so, I at my own cost, I did this for free because I believed in the cause. We fought it. We challenged it. We said, look, I don't believe the IRS has the authority to collect this fine. We don't believe the IRS has the authority to tell people how to spend their money, how to budget their money, what to prioritize their spending on. And we don't believe the IRS should be collecting this money because I actually played a video in a court case. It was actually pretty cool. I was in tax court, and I played a video of Barack Obama saying, let me get this straight. This is not a tax. And I said, so if this isn't a tax, why is the taxation department and the IRS, which is the police agency for taxation, why are they enforcing this if it's not a tax? He got mad, told me it didn't matter. I laughed, and we were suing. We were actually doing okay. We're making some pretty okay strides. And then Trump won and got rid of the fines and penalties for not having insurance, and everything I was doing kind of became a moot point because they got rid of it. So, that was the start of the resistance, the state of defiance, and the start of Whitmer Accounting and Tax, because I saw a market there to help people. And I also saw a market in, I just picked up 2 clients today that called me, H&R Block and, Jackson Hewitt, and these bigger firms are pretty predatory with how they charge people and where they put their offices and stuff. So I started my firm in 2014 and started doing, actually I was doing taxes on the side before that, but I really went on my own in 2014 and started focusing on that. And something I noticed is every year as I expanded, I was doing mostly taxes in 2014. 2016, we got into bookkeeping. 2018, we got into payroll. And throughout the time, I always actually did representation from the IRS, audit support, audit defense. And then I got into actually 2022, Whitmer Tax Defense was launched. That is a premier accounting defense firm specializing specifically in resisting the rogue agency that is the IRS. So we're doing more offer and compromises, more aggressive IRS representation, and we're getting into property tax assessment challenges for people in Western New York, where I'm located. More on that later. But yeah, we launched Whitmer Tax Defense, and what this is it's essentially a more aggressive resistance to the IRS's what they're doing. And one thing we want to work on is helping people who need the help. And I'm going to read about an article here. There's a lot of arguments about the new IRS agents. What are they going to be doing? What's their role going to be? The people on the left need to justify the new government jobs by saying that they're going to go after millionaires and just people who aren't paying their fair share, which, personally, I think that when 80% of our budget, that's why it's like 50% of our budget is going to defense spending and committing war crimes by blowing up places in the Middle East. I don't think you should pay anything. I don't consent to using my tax dollars to blow up people. So that's a whole other issue in itself. But they're hiring these agents, and they're going to go after tax cheats. Well, for the last about decade, the IRS has admitted multiple times. As a matter of fact, if I could clip videos in, there's a video of the old head of the IRS openly admitting that they audit low-income taxpayers at a higher rate than millionaires and billionaires. And he said they do it for a couple reasons. Number one, the earned income credit and the child tax credit gets abused, so they do it for that. And he also said it's because they can't have representation. Millionaires, billionaires hire tax lawyers, they hire tax accountants, they hire people like me, and we resist and we make them work for their money, whereas lower income people don't do that. A lot of them don't respond. And I've seen that personally in my life where people would file their taxes, they get a letter from the IRS, they panic and don't respond, and then the IRS just takes their refund or doesn't give them money or takes their next year's refund and it's cleared up. Even if they're right or wrong, there's no challenge to it. So the IRS has kind of found a loophole in how to claw back money from the low income. Right here, I'm reading a recent article. IRS went after the very poorest taxpayers. There's a number here if I could find it. Millionaires receiving a regular audit is 1.1%. Lowest wage earners is actually audited at 1.27%, which is a higher rate. It's not much, but it's higher. And the reason for that is they use it to go after the earned income credit. There's fraud around the earned income credit and stuff like that. And we launched this firm to make sure that even people who didn't make $1 million can have proper representation in front of the IRS. And one thing I've learned is that they don't. A lot of these chain firms, these bigger locations, these bigger companies, they'll do your tax return. They'll give you the credit card that you can bill right away, and they'll take your money. And then when you get audited or you get a letter, they're not there for you. And it's really sad to see, but it's happening all over the country, as evidenced by what the IRS is doing. So part of the resistance and defiance agenda is, our firm works with low-income people, and we do a couple free representations a year. We do a couple free audit support things a year, and we try to provide a a decent cost support for people who need it. But out of my clients, I would say more of my low-income self-employed clients get audited than my millionaire clients. As a matter of fact, I think the last 2 or 3 years, only one client that makes more than $1 million got any form of letter. They questioned his charitable donations, whereas about 15 to 30 of my clients who make less had issues. So it's not a high rate, but it still is a rate. And then people that live in New York have a different issue. And this is going to be more New York focused, but the issue you have in New York State is the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, abbreviated as the DTF, which is quite fitting because they will fuck you. The New York State Department of Taxation and Finance has found a loophole that they're sending letters to taxpayers. And I will do a video on this by itself. They're sending letters to taxpayers saying, hey, you filed a tax return. We're doing a desk review. Please send your W-2s, your 1099s to prove withholding. If you don't respond to this letter within 60 days, we reserve the right to not give you your refund. And my clients that are getting that letter are mostly low-income renters who move. And the reason why they're doing that is because if you're a low-income renter that moved, you might not get that letter. So they're essentially using that as a way to not give you your refund. It's pretty sad to see. It's pretty messed up, but you know, New York State has to claw back the money they're giving out because they're broke. They got a big budget deficit, so the more they don't have to mail out, the better they're doing. Another thing New York State has done, which I've successfully fought before, but it's really hard to fight, is they'll send you adjustment letters. Hey, you filed your taxes. You said you were due a refund of $1,118. We think you're due a refund of $982. Here's your $982. Therefore, we're good. And why they do that is they recalculate credits, which makes no sense. But if you think about it, even if you take $100, $200 from a million taxpayers, it's still $200 million. And really, for $200, are you going to pay someone like me $1,000 to fight it? The answer is no. So it's kind of like that theft argument of, if someone steals $20 from you, how much time and energy are you going to spend fighting it? Same thing. And New York State knows that. They know that it costs more to represent you, or it costs more to pay for representation than it does to just pay it. It costs more to fight it than it does to just pay it. So New York State's got a good grift. The IRS has a good grift. And, that's really why we launched Whitmer Tax Defense and are focusing more on, aggressive IRS challenges, because we believe that everyone has the right to proper defense and everyone should be able to resist the IRS if they see fit. So that's kind of what we've been working on here. It's really sad to see what's happening. And I don't think these 87,000 IRS agents are going to be designated to focusing on wealthy millionaires and billionaires. I think that is a bullshit statement used by the Dems to justify hiring more government jobs. It's a jobs program. I've had some luck. I'm pushing 14 minutes. I don't have much time left, but I've had a lot of luck fighting the IRS. Mostly if you do a decent job keeping records, you'll be okay. I've got my ass kicked a couple times because my clients were just ill-prepared or they just really messed up, and I'm just kind of doing damage control. But, we do have a good success rate resisting and fighting the IRS. But a lot of it is just, it's time wasting. It's a matter of they have all the time in the world. They have, they're getting paid to jam you up. So, they're in no rush. They'll look through everything they can, and it's their job to find something. So it becomes essentially a compromise. What do you find? You think we owe you $2,000. I don't think we do. And then, you go through back and forth, and it's like a negotiation. It's kind of really similar to like a racket, right? Like the mafia comes in and says they'll provide protection for $2,000. You say no, and then they burn your, they take your store. That's what the IRS does. It's really no different. I guess the only difference is the mafia ends up going to jail, where the IRS is supported by a large chunk of the population. So it's really kind of sad to see. But I do believe that what's going to happen next is going to be a nightmare. Maybe later on I'll talk more about the EIDL loans and the COVID relief funds given out to businesses and what that means, or these ERTC credits. A lot of things happened during COVID. The government realized that they really screwed up the lockdown, so they're issuing a bunch of my culpas by giving out free money, but there's a lot of strings attached, and I think that's where those IRS agents are going to come in, auditing these businesses and auditing the people that are giving them out. But yeah, the IRS has openly admitted multiple times to auditing low-income taxpayers at a higher rate than millionaires and billionaires, mostly because the poor people can't afford representation. It's similar to the legal system. If a poor person gets caught selling marijuana, they're going to face a longer and harsher sentence because they can't afford proper representation. Where you have people like Brock Turner, who raped someone and his daddy paid for a lawyer, and he's no longer in jail. It's similar with the IRS. It's the same way. People just don't want to admit it because they justify it by saying my tax dollars fund the roads, and really don't want to address the fact that there's mass corruption, there's mass problems, and there's mass issues with it. But that's where I started my defiance, was through helping represent low-income people that couldn't afford it, and my own time, my own cost. And it's been fun. It's frustrating too, because I wish it didn't happen, but it does. But yeah, that's where we're at. That's this week's Weekly Whitmer. If you guys ever have a topic you want me to talk about, feel free to message me or shoot me a comment. Yeah, thanks guys for tuning in. As tax season goes on, remember that taxes are the price you pay, so the IRS doesn't put you in jail for not paying taxes. And if you don't pay your taxes, how can we bomb brown people in the Middle East and fund the jobs program that is the United States government, while duping people into thinking they're helping the poor? The government is a jobs program, and that's really it. So thanks guys for tuning in. Have a great week. I will see you next Wednesday. Thank you guys. Take care.